Welcome to another mentoring moment with Dr. Mo. I'm Dr. Mo, and in this mentoring moment, we will elevate and enhance your tapping practice by taking a deep dive into hunting for aspects. So for my previous video on the nervous system and its relationship with aspects, you're kind of starting to see how the aspects of a specific event are what give the event as a whole its intensity, because you can see aspects as the building blocks of a specific event. Okay, and so in this video, as I'm referring to aspects are always in relation to a specific event. So that's actually the first step in hunting for aspects, is being able to identify a specific event. Okay, so once you have that, another thing that I recommend doing in your sessions is pre-framing to your clients about how EFT works from a processing standpoint and what they can expect. So let them know that you will be asking them very specific questions about a memory or about specific experiences that bubble up during a session, only as a way of being able to uncover parts of that memory that really stand out to them, right? And let them know that those things that they might focus on within a memory could be emotions, or they could be thoughts, or they could even be sensory aspects, right? Things that you saw or heard or felt or tasted, etc. Right? So it can be helpful to pre-frame to your clients and let them know that sometimes what they are focusing on within a memory, it makes perfect sense as to why their focus is going to that. And other times it may not make a lick of sense as to why they're focusing on, that I'm really focusing on that guy over there that had that blue shirt on. I can't seem to get it out of my mind. That's all that I'm focusing on, right? So let them know that sometimes these aspects make sense and sometimes they don't make sense. But whatever comes up for them is true and it's valid, and it will be tapped on accordingly, because what comes up for them, there's a reason to it, whether we know it cognitively or not. It's coming up because it's important. So you want to let your client know about all of this through the act of pre-framing. Okay, and so once you have pre-framed to your client and you have, of course, identified a specific event, now you can move on to finding those juicy aspects that are potentially supporting that memory. So a really great question, my go-to question is, what are you focusing on? What stands out to you as you bring that memory to mind? What are you focusing on in that memory? So what often happens when you ask this question to your clients is that they will be very forthcoming about offering emotions or thought aspects about how they feel when they think about that memory now. And of course, those are completely valid aspects. So of course, tap on those, get a SUD score before and after, and monitor the progress of those emotions or thought aspects throughout the tapping. And make sure that you get them down to as close as 0 as you can, if not 0. Okay, but I also invite you to become a gentle skeptic and become really curious if there are any more aspects that are at play supporting that memory beyond emotions or beyond thought aspects. What about the sensory aspects? Are there any in that memory? Okay, so let's say, for instance, you have tapped on all the aspects that your client has offered when you ask them that question, what are you focusing on? All those aspects are 0, and now you can incorporate a more sensory view of that memory and maybe you can uncover some sensory aspects that are hidden underneath the surface that your client may not be consciously focused on, but are still contributing to some intensity. So how you can do this is that you can ask your client to vividly imagine the memory, right? Use your testing methods. Have them vividly imagine that memory, make everything brighter and louder and stronger, and up the ante on that memory. So what you are doing here is you are having your client engage with the sensory world of that memory. And in doing that, you can uncover any sensory aspects that you may not have even been aware of, and your client may not have even been aware of that exist. And in that same vein, you can also uncover more emotions or thought aspects. But this is kind of just a way of digging a little deeper and really testing to see if that memory has any sensory aspects that you didn't pick up on in that initial sweep of what are you focusing on. Is that starting to make some sense? Okay, so, but let's say you're tapping on an emotional aspect and that aspect just won't go down, right, despite all the tapping that you're doing. So this is an indication and can show you that that emotional aspect is enmeshed with another aspect. And that other aspect is usually a sensory aspect. So this phenomenon of enmeshed aspect doesn't really have a name in clinical EFT. I have taken the liberty of calling it enmeshed aspects. I also call it primary and secondary aspects. And so to kind of explain this idea of enmeshed aspects, let's do an example together so you can kind of get the idea. So let's say that you and your client are tapping on this memory that your client has of when they fell from a tree into a sandpit. And your client, you ask them, well, what are you focusing on when you think of that memory now? And they're like, well, I just feel really angry about it, right? So you validate your client, of course, and you tap on that emotional aspect, getting the SUD level. And you notice that you're doing a lot of tapping, and this SUD level is not going down. Sometimes it even goes up, but there's really no progress. So at this time, you're thinking, okay, maybe there's something else that is generating this aspect of anger. Maybe there's a primary aspect that is at play that is contributing to the secondary aspect of this emotion. So you can dig a little deeper and ask, well, what about that memory is making you angry? What are you really focusing on, and what makes you the most angry in that memory when you think about it? And they might say, oh, well, now that you say that, I'm really focusing on my cousin's face. I saw his face as I was falling, and he was laughing at me, right? So here you have uncovered a really vital piece to the resolution of this memory, because you were tapping on the emotion of anger, which was great because that's what your client was focusing on, but that's a secondary aspect. The primary aspect is the visual aspect of seeing the cousin's face as he was falling, and that visual aspect is generating the secondary aspect. Without that primary aspect, that secondary aspect of anger would not be there. Right? So now you can switch up your tapping, and instead of focusing solely on the anger, you can focus on what's generating the anger, which is the visual aspect. So I call this enmeshed aspects because the visual aspect and that emotional aspect, or the sensory aspect with the emotional aspect, are forming like a larger aspect as a whole. It's one large enmeshed aspect, but when you break it up, you can see the contribution of the primary aspect and the contribution of the secondary aspect. Okay, so in this example, you kind of see that phenomenon and how it will likely manifest in your sessions. And you can use this example to your advantage, knowing that this dynamic exists between sensory aspects and emotion or thought aspects, by having a go-to when the emotional aspects don't seem to be decreasing. You can become more curious and ask, oh, maybe there's a sensory aspect that's fueling that emotional aspect. Or you can simply streamline your tapping and really focus on sensory aspects from the beginning and ask, what are you focusing on, in regards to sights or smells or things you heard. You can focus and direct your tapping from the beginning so that you're always tapping on those primary aspects. Okay? So that's just something to experiment with in your sessions, but knowing this and this phenomenon that exists within tapping can help you better deal with these aspects that are kind of stubborn and they won't decrease. Okay, so to review, as you continue tapping and hunting for aspects, make sure to pre-frame to your clients about how you will be processing within a session. You know, what questions they can expect from you, what the experience will be like, and ask questions that direct your client's focus to a particular memory and inquire what they are focusing on. And lastly, become curious if there are any sensory aspects at play that are beyond the scope of emotions or thoughts. Okay, because emotional freedom techniques is the name of the game, right? But that doesn't mean that there's only emotions that are at play, and emotions are the only things that should be tapped on in regards to aspects. If you solely focus on emotions or thoughts, you're missing out on a world of difference for your client and helping them truly process and integrate experiences, and helping them achieve freedom from the past. So I hope you have enjoyed this mentoring moment in uncovering and hunting for aspects. I'm Dr. Mo, and we will talk and tap soon. Bye.